As many of you know, um, I am studying to be an inclusive early childhood education teacher. And I've taken a lot of classes my first year and a half of school that have taught me a lot about inclusion and the dynamics of classrooms and how different every single student is. And what amazes me is that after all this talk of inclusion and all this talk of wanting to change the educational system to better accommodate every type of student, we still have the exact same classrooms. If you look back at the first classroom that was ever made, there's a chalkboard in the front and desks sitting behind it. And what gets me is that we have so many different types of learners. We have kinesthetic learners, we have visual learners, we have auditory learners, we have people who just, I guess, are the normal student who can learn the way that they're taught. And the reality is not all students are like that. And I certainly was not. I am not a test taker. I do not do well when I take tests in class. And yet we still have this system that makes it impossible for these amazingly talented, smart individuals to feel like they have no way to succeed, because the only way they can is through taking a test that maybe is really difficult for them because they struggle with multiple choice. Personally, when I take a multiple choice style test, I genuinely don't ever do well, because the way I learn, I constantly second guess myself on those tests, and everyone's like, go with your first answer, it's always the best. But personally, I don't think my first answer is always the best. I like to go back and think through my questions and see if something I read later in the test helps me with a previous question. But the problem is my only option is to do these tests, and I continually get these like average grades. I could be doing better in the class if I had another opportunity. What I don't understand is that our system is so broken and so affected that we literally have state officials who have never set foot in one of our classrooms making every single rule for our students. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think standardized tests are useful. They narrow down the intelligence of a student to pieces of paper on every subject in the school. But we don't see art on that. We don't see musical theater. We don't see choir. We don't see extracurricular sports. All you see is the academic, structured expectation that these people who have never set foot in a classroom with all these amazing, talented students, and that's how they determine what school they're going to go to. I mean, personally, I took the ACT because it's easier for me to take, but an SAT would have been so difficult for me because that's not how I learn, that's not how I process things, that's not what I'm going to do best on. It's such a simple change that can be made. We could progressively, actively be in the classroom trying to implement new, active ways of learning, not sitting in the desk constantly, maybe having, instead of an assessment that is only a test, having an abstract version, a written version, and a test version. That way a visual learner can express their knowledge of the subject that they've been learning for the last few months in a unique, amazing way that other students could probably never have thought of, but they're expressing their knowledge in the best way they know possible. And I think that's what's important for teachers to remember when they're in classrooms, because these students all have amazing outlooks on the world, whether it's through theater, whether it's through playing a sport, whether they are a great history buff, but they struggle with math. Every single person on this planet has their strengths and their weaknesses, and our job as teachers is to educate these students the best that we can, and that's tailoring to their style of learning. I personally am going to of course, always put what my students think they can do best first. And obviously, that's vital to these kids when they're learning in early childhood. But it's also vital in high school because I see students like myself who are overly stressed, overly anxious about all these grades and getting into colleges and doing the best we can and showing our best selves, but we're limited to this one small section of teaching that is just so structured and is still not changing. We have this same type of standardized test that we did when it was first created. Do you know how many things have changed since then? Our cultural expectations have changed. Our outlook on the world, our economic status, everything has changed, and yet we still have the same test assessing our students in the same structured way. But what we don't understand is that not every student comes from the same educational background, and that's okay. But the fact that we have a test that is solely geared towards a certain individual student who has a strength in that one section of education is appalling to me. And it is important for people to know that, like, as a teacher, as a person, every single person you meet in the world can have an immense impact on you as a person. And every experience we have, it adds to our knowledge of the world, of who we are as people, of what we possibly want to do. I personally was inspired by a family member to become a teacher. If she had never instilled that idea on me, I probably wouldn't have gone into inclusive early childhood education, but I did. And I think that it's important for people to understand that we need to progressively and actively make these changes in education, because if we don't come together and try and make these changes, these students who are overlooked by so many institutions who could contribute so much to that community are just never going to feel like they can be successful. And then the continuation of the cycle of stress and anxiety coming from these high expectations that schools set on their students, and the stress levels and the emotional roller coaster that kids go through when they're going through middle school and high school. I mean, I know I went through a lot of hard times, and a lot of it was contributing to the stress that I was under through school. And I know that as a teacher, I would never want any of my students to feel like that. I want them to be excited and ready to learn, because it's the most important thing you can do, is to educate yourself on the world around you so you can better contribute to it. But we have to educate students in a way that they can learn their best possible. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, they just need these teachers to encourage them, support them, never make them feel like they can't be capable of doing a great job in the classroom. But that doesn't look the same for me versus another person. We are completely different people. We've had completely different lives, completely different backgrounds contributing to how we express our education in the classroom. And I think that is what is missing, that these state officials just oversee the fact that, like, we have so many amazing, talented humans on this planet. Every single person on this planet can contribute in some way to this world's progression. And the fact that so many of these students are struggling to the point of almost breaking, or struggling to the point where, like, they don't feel like they are smart enough to be in a great school, in a great institution. That's just so sad to me, because everyone deserves the same opportunities. Obviously, that's not always going to be possible, but everyone deserves to have the chance to showcase their individual educational progression throughout their years in the best way they think they can. And that's my issue with how we are running education right now. And I hope that my personal teaching experience can make a difference in a child's life at some point. And I hope that other people can learn from multiple other teachers' styles. I know I've been learning progressively through going through classrooms. It's amazing to see how these teachers adapt and adjust their classrooms to tailor to their students' needs. And I think that's what needs to be constantly happening in every classroom. And the fact that we're still sitting in desks, still sitting in lecture halls, listening to teachers talk at you, and then you're taking notes, taking a test, it makes the material so much less important in my mind, and it doesn't instill that drive in me to want to learn more about this subject. If I was able to work on an amazing project with three other students on a culture that we were very interested in, I mean, I know personally I'm going to have a completely different view on that culture than another student in my school will, because all of us are from all over the country. Probably all of us are probably from different states, but we all have our view that we can contribute and add to a great overall idea that could be showcased to a class. And I think that's what's important. That's what we should be looking for in how we teach. And the fact that we are limited by the university's mandates, the state's laws, like, that's just so awful to me, because I think that if these state officials came into a classroom and saw how different every single student was, how different their developmental abilities were, because not everyone's going to be on the same track. I know I was behind most of my life, and that's okay. I have somehow gotten here. I'm somehow studying to do exactly what I want to do and what I am passionate about and love. And I didn't have to be a straight A student to do that. But the fact that so many kids are put under this pressure and are constantly trying to achieve this impossible goal because their learning style doesn't exactly line up with how the class is taught. So they're already going from 0 to 0 because they have no ability to better their education, better their performance, if they can't show how knowledgeable they are about individual subjects that might not be as important. And that's what makes me sad, because we've probably gone through so many school systems and seen all these different ideas, and yes, we've made some adjustments. I know early childhood is definitely progressively doing that, but it needs to happen in later years, because these kids doing 8 hours of homework on weekends and doing multiple tests on a day, that stresses people out. That gives them anxiety. The anxiety and stress cases have gone up immensely in previous years, especially in my area, I personally have heard. And that's sad to me, because I want education to be a place where people can go to explore and learn and discover new things about our world. And that's what it should be. That's what I want everyone to experience. And the fact that that's not how education is anymore, or was ever, honestly, the fact that it can't be that outlet, that place for students to feel home, safe, happy to explore new things, discover new things about what they're passionate about, that's what makes me sad. And that's where I think that our education system needs to make a difference. Because if we don't step up now, it's going to continue in this cycle. It's going to continue to be the standardized tests. We're going to continue to overlook these amazingly talented, great students who have abilities that we could never imagine having or being capable of having. And it's so sad to me, because it would provide students with that initiative, that drive to want to learn more. And I know that there are great teachers out there that are actively doing that in the best way possible. But it starts with the policies. It starts with how we are allowed and able to run our classrooms. And then, as teachers, if we are given that ability, I hope that teachers take advantage of the opportunities that we hopefully will eventually have one day to make the classroom an environment that students are excited to be in, that students don't fall asleep in class for, that students find their passion. That's what I want for education, and I think that that is the most important thing we can do as teachers.